I rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. The important thing is to never stop questioning. The scientist isn't the person who gives the right answers, he's the one that asks the right questions. These quotes from Richard Feynman, Albert Einstein, and Claude Levi-Strauss gives a pretty good insight on the root of scientists and science discoveries: questioning. Often we will hear in society that science should never be questioned, or that science is always right, or that science is the only truth. While some scientific discoveries fit these descriptions well, most of the time this isn't actually the case. Because we live in a world where if you add the term backed by science, we automatically associate it with the truth and never question it. Now you're probably thinking, well, your name literally says you have no credibility, why would we consider your point of view? Well, simply put, you shouldn't. However, you should consider the point of view of other scientists. David Deutsch is a physicist, professor at Oxford, and one of the most accomplished scientists of the modern world. In his book, The Beginning of Infinity, he covers the idea of why you should always question science. Here is a quote from his book. But in reality, scientific discoveries are not derived from anything. We do not read them in nature, nor does nature write them on to us. They are guesses, cold conjectures. David also showcased a very interesting and important perspective in the beginning of the book, in which he describes that these facts or discoveries that are backed by scientists aren't actually facts, they are theories. Scientists claim to find specific dust particles on a star billions of light years away, but how do they know? Do they have a machine that transports them to that star's location? Do they have a telescope that can precisely detect the specific particles of the star? They just have a theory. It is the most likely theory, but a theory nonetheless. If this is really the case, think about how many so-called facts that were or are backed by science that are just guesses from hundreds of years ago, that don't have the technology or information that we have today. If every human in history never questioned the science or the perceived truth, we would still be living 500 years in the past, as great inventors, industrialists, scientists, etc. would have never found the freedom to question, create, and discover things that have changed our world forever. Ignaz Semmelweis was a Hungarian physician who worked at a hospital in the mid-19th century. During his time, high infection rates and mortality rates were through the roof in the maternity ward. The general consensus was that this was caused by miasma theory, that the environment was creating bad air. Semmelweis concluded that the diseases were being transferred from doctors not washing their hands after handling dead bodies. This was met with heavy criticism and was ignored despite the falling death rates after implementing his method. It wasn't until Louis Pasteur confirmed that Semmelweis was indeed correct. There are many examples like Semmelweis. If I dedicated each video to a person who went against the establishment fact, then this YouTube channel would last for 100 years due to the amount of times situations like this has happened. But what about the ones that aren't known, that perhaps nobody really knows? When you read David Deutsch say, scientific theories are nothing but guesses and cold conjectures, it makes you wonder that this can't just be associated with science. History, health, and finance are examples of subjects that are not nearly studied or have heavy investments involved as other scientific subjects. If the great scientists of the world are saying that most of their answers are just guesses, then what about the historians of the world, the nutritionists, the psychologists? Economists make predictions all the time about the stock market, but do we ever take their word for it to the bank? Some people do, and some people win, and some lose. But not everyone does. In fact, most people don't. Despite the fact that economists know more about the economy and the financial world, we never take their word for it because they have been wrong in the past. But so have scientists, so have historians, and so on. A lot of it can be associated with just being wrong. However, some of it can be associated with corruption. When you were a kid, I'm sure you played a lot of games with your friends. One of them was probably Cops and Robbers, and it makes sense because when we think of the cops' biggest rivals, we think of robbers. But the real battle is actually between the cops and the lawyers. It's just not as fun to play. When suspects are being interrogated by the police, they see the cop/negotiator as a righteous man who wants to help you find the real killer and get you out of this mess. You also see him as a man who knows the law inside and out, like the way Chris Christie knows the Arby's menu. No disrespect to Chris Christie or fat people. But the truth is that the police officer wants you to get charged. That's why you're there. Finding the real criminal isn't the top of their list. That's why when they read you your rights, that says everything you say can and will be used against you. Oh yeah, and it's legal for police officers to lie in interrogation. That's why you always hear the phrase, get a lawyer. If cops knew so much about the law, they would have been a lawyer and got paid some real money. No disrespect to cops, they are important. Now you're probably thinking, sweet story dude, what the hell does this have to do with questioning science? Well, like cops, there are quote-unquote professionals out there who are perceived to be experts on a subject, but actually aren't, and who is perceived to be fighting for the benefit of humanity, but really are just fighting for their own benefit. Again, no disrespect to cops, they are important to the world. I'm sure you have all heard of the infamous Elizabeth Holmes. Theranos claimed to have developed a revolutionary technology that could conduct a wide range of blood tests with just a few drops of blood. Founder Elizabeth Holmes claimed to be an expert in the blood testing sector, despite not having any medical degree at 19 years of age. However, this was never questioned by investors or journalists. Theranos ended up being a billion-dollar hoax as their blood tests were ineffective and even was a potential health concern for patients. One of the employees from Theranos, Tyler Schultz, contacted Holmes about the ineffectiveness of their blood tests. However, he received an email from Theranos co-founder and Holmes' romantic partner, Ramesh Sunny Balwani. This was the message from Balwani.
That reckless comment, based on absolute ignorance, is so insulting to me that had any other person made these statements, we would have held them accountable in the strongest way. The only reason I have taken so much time away from work to address this personally is because you are Mr. Schultz's grandson. The only email on this topic I want to see from you going forward is an apology.
Elizabeth Holmes was not an expert in this field, nor did she have good intentions of providing safe blood testing. If she did, she would have stopped the company long before receiving any funding from investors. Here are other examples of corruption in the science community. Project 226 was a study where scientists were paid off by the sugar industry to claim that it did not contribute to cardiovascular disease, instead put the blame on dietary fat. Trofim Lysenko, a Soviet biologist, rejected Mendelian genetics in favor of his own theories. His influence led to the persecution and suppression of scientists who disagreed with him. Lysenko's ideas were eventually discredited, but not before causing significant harm to Soviet biology. Scientists were paid off throughout the second half of the 20th century by the tobacco industry to question the notion that smoking is detrimental to human health. If the most trusted study can be corrupted or just straight up wrong, then I think it is safe to say other studies should be questioned as well. If you go through every study, you're bound to find a professional or study that was false, exaggerated, or corrupted. Psychology. Diederik Stapel was a Dutch social psychologist who admitted to fabricating and manipulating data in multiple research studies. History. It is believed that the Egyptian pyramids were tombs for the pharaohs despite there being no mummies in them. Sounds like a guess to me. Journalists. I don't even think I need to provide an example for that one. If I were to list every false or questionable analysis from every profession or study, you would be watching this video until next Tuesday. However, you will never know that going through your daily life, so take everything you hear with a grain of salt and never stop questioning.